and immediately started shouting about emergency codes and illegal gatherings. Delaney didn't say a word until he reached her. Then he calmly pulled out his phone, tapped the screen, and played a video of her cutting the fence. Karen's mouth fell open. "You can stop talking now," Delaney said. "You're on private property. This man has every legal right to throw a party, drink beer, and teach chickens how to dance if he wants. You, however, just committed trespassing and destruction of property." She stammered. "You're joking." "I'm not," Delaney replied. "You cut the fence, Karen. That's criminal trespass and property damage." "You're going to arrest me?" she asked, voice trembling. Delaney nodded. "Yes." And then he did. In front of nearly 50 people, Sheriff Delaney read her rights and handcuffed her right there in the middle of the field. The crowd didn't cheer. They just stared in stunned silence, unsure whether they were witnessing justice or a really elaborate prank. Karen protested the entire way to the cruiser, shouting about corruption, vendettas, and legal action. The only sound that cut through her ranting was the faint click of someone snapping a photo on their phone. Within the hour, that photo was circulating online. Karen, cuffed in her Sunday best, screaming into the clouds like the wind had betrayed her. Someone gave it a caption that stuck: "Spiritual Landlord Karen." The next morning, her mugshot made it to a local gossip blog. Then a regional meme page. Then national account. It went viral fast. Suddenly, people from all over were commenting on HOA tyranny, rural independence, and the absurdity of a woman who thought she could fine a cow for mooing. My inbox was flooded. Reporters reached out. Bloggers asked for interviews. Even Brad messaged me again. This time, he simply wrote, "Best 10 acres I ever sold." The following days were unusually quiet, but not in a peaceful way. It was the kind of silence you get when someone's plotting behind curtains, the stillness of a storm building out of sight. Karen had been released on bail within hours. I figured she'd lay low for a while, lick her wounds, maybe retreat into her sterile house and regroup. But I was wrong. What happened next was so strange, so unbelievably bold, that even Clint, who once watched a donkey break through a church window during a wedding, said he'd never seen anything like it. It started with the fence. One morning, Macy found the north side gate swinging wide open, chain clipped clean through. At first, we thought it was kids or vandals, maybe a bored teenager with bolt cutters. But then we followed the tire marks, fresh, narrow treads that cut through my field and curled down toward the stream bed where I kept my salt licks and a few shaded spots for livestock. There, to our absolute disbelief, was a half-dozen plastic lawn chairs, a foldable picnic table, and several cheap decorations stuck into the grass. It looked like someone had attempted to host a small event on my land. We followed the scattered sandwich wrappers, a few drink cups, and even a soggy pamphlet with the words, "Oakwood Lakes HOA Community Picnic" printed in blue letters. The date was yesterday. Karen had held a picnic on my ranch. At first, I thought it was a joke. Clint stood there in the shade with his hands on his hips, looking around like he expected hidden cameras. Macy shook her head and bent down to pick up one of the pamphlet. It was printed on glossy paper with the HOA logo front and center. Karen hadn't just trespassed again. She'd hosted an HOA event behind my back, on my land, without permission, without even attempting to hide it. This wasn't delusion. This was war. We gathered the items carefully, photographing everything. I recorded a video walking through the area, narrating what we found. The tire marks, the broken gate chain, the leftover decorations. I had Clint give a deadpan weather report just to lighten the mood, which, to be fair, helped keep my anger from boiling over. The thing is, I wasn't even mad because of the invasion itself. I was mad because of what it represented. Karen wasn't just ignoring the boundary. She was trying to rewrite it. I sent everything to Sheriff Delaney. He called back in less than 10 minutes, voice low and tight. He'd just gotten back from dealing with a noise complaint that turned out to be Karen yelling at a clerk in the hardware store for not carrying community-approved gardening tools. I told him what we found, and he let out a long sigh. Then he said something I'll never forget. She thinks if she acts like the queen long enough, people will just bow. That evening, Delaney drove out and walked the site with us. He took more photos, asked a few questions, and then nodded toward the property line. She's trying to prove community use. If she gets enough people to say this was shared land, she might try some backdoor claim about adverse use or implied access. It won't hold in court, not with your paperwork, but she's not aiming for court. She's aiming for public narrative. I blinked at that. She wants people to believe this land belongs to the HOA? Delaney nodded. She's laying a foundation. One crazy brick at a time. The next morning, I received a thick envelope in my mailbox. Inside was a cease and desist letter from Karen's newly hired attorney, accusing me of harassing her, slandering her position as HOA president, and deliberately misrepresenting ownership of disputed community land. I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. Clint read the letter over my shoulder and said, "That's rich. You think she paid full price or got a discount on delusion?" But it wasn't just the letter. Word had started spreading in town that Karen was planning a legal maneuver. She was talking to her lawyer about something called an injunction to block me from hosting any more gatherings or altering shared boundaries. She even started telling HOA members that she was working to reclaim the ranch under community easement. It was nonsense, of course. Legal fiction with no legs to stand on. But fiction, when told loud enough, becomes dangerous. I decided not to wait for her next move. I met with my own lawyer, a sharp, quiet woman named Carla who grew up in ranch country and had a zero-tolerance policy for suburban tyranny. She reviewed the documents, shook her head once, and said, "We're going to file a countersuit for trespass, harassment, and attempted fraud. And if she even breathes near your fence line again, we'll ask for a restraining order." I liked her already. But the best part came a few days later. Delaney called and said Karen was hosting another, unofficial, HOA gathering. This time, it was at her own property, but the theme of the meeting was reaffirming community borders. He warned me that she'd invited members of the press. That's when I decided to show up too. Not to shout or argue, but to quietly hand out laminated copies of the exclusion deed, county boundary maps, and a timeline of Karen's recent antics, complete with photos of her cutting my fence and being arrested at the barbecue. I even included QR codes linking to the viral meme for context. It was petty, sure, but it was surgical. I showed up 5 minutes after the meeting started, walked through the room like I was delivering mail, and handed a folder to every board member, every attending resident, and, most importantly, every local reporter. Karen didn't notice at first. She was too busy giving a speech about neighborhood unity and how we must reclaim shared spaces from chaos. But once she saw me standing in the back, arms folded, she froze. Then she saw someone reading the laminated packet. Then 2 more. Then someone started laughing. The reporters surrounded me after the meeting. I didn't give them much. Just facts. Just dates. Just documents. I didn't slander Karen. I didn't need to. The evidence did all the talking. And by morning, local headlines had already shifted tone. No longer was Karen the concerned community guardian. Now she was the woman who tried to annex a private ranch using fake picnics and junk mail threat. My phone buzzed all day with texts and screenshots. One headline read, "HOA President Karen, defending the neighborhood or redrawing maps in her mind?" After that, something shifted. Karen didn't disappear. She wasn't capable of silence, but her influence cracked. People started questioning her decisions. Members of the board reached out to me quietly, apologizing, asking if I'd ever consider talking to them about ranch upkeep tips or property management advice. One even joked about holding future HOA meetings in my barn. I said no, of course, but the sentiment was clear. Karen's throne had cracked, and her crown was wobbling. I reinforced the gate that week, added extra cameras, and installed floodlights along the fence line just in case. Macy and Clint helped me paint a new sign, bigger and bolder, hanging right where Karen had hosted her picnic. It read, "Private property. No exceptions. No picnic. No queens." We even outlined it in solar lights, so it'd glow at night like a warning flare. A month passed, and for the first time since I moved onto the ranch, the only sounds in the morning were the distant lowing of cattle, the hum of insects warming up for the day, and the steady creak of my porch swing as I rocked with coffee in hand. Karen hadn't made a move since the last HOA meeting imploded under the weight of her fiction. Her legal threats had dried up. Her board allies had stopped returning her calls. Her voice, once a daily disruption like a smoke alarm with a dead battery, had gone silent. It would have been peaceful if not for the lingering feeling that she wasn't done yet. People like her don't retreat, they hibernate. Clint said it best one afternoon while we were patching a section of fence near the southern slope. He was leaning on a post, squinting into the sun, when he said, "It's like she's the boss in the last level of a video game. You know she's still lurking, just waiting for the dramatic entrance." Macy laughed, but I could see in her eyes she agreed. The quiet felt too purposeful, too forced. And sure enough, the final chapter began just when we least expected it. It started with a letter, hand-delivered by a courier wearing a tie too tight for the heat. He didn't say a word, just handed me the envelope and left. Inside was a printed statement from Karen's lawyer declaring that Karen was initiating a civil suit, not just against me, but also against the county records office, the sheriff's department, and the HOA board itself. The basis of the lawsuit? Karen claimed that she had been misled, betrayed, and that I had somehow orchestrated a coordinated campaign of psychological manipulation and boundary theft. I reread the line 3 times. Boundary theft. It sounded like a crime you'd commit with a shovel and a bad attitude. Macy asked if she could frame the letter. Clint offered to use it for target practice. I took the letter straight to Carla, my attorney, who flipped through the pages like she was reading bad fan fiction. She said calmly, "This isn't a lawsuit. It's a tantrum with legal stationery." Still, she filed the proper counter-response and notified the sheriff's office. It wasn't the first baseless lawsuit the town had seen, but it was definitely one of the most ridiculous. And what made it more embarrassing for Karen was what happened next. See, the county had already grown tired of her drama. Delaney had collected enough footage, complaints, and documented behavior that when the judge reviewed the history behind her claims, he scheduled a public hearing. Not a closed-door mediation. A full hearing. Karen was about to be exposed, not just for the lies she'd spread, but for every false complaint, every inch of fence she'd crossed, every footstep she'd planted on land that wasn't hers. Word spread like wildfire. The hearing wasn't until Friday morning, but by Thursday afternoon the courthouse parking lot looked like a tailgate party. Reporters, bloggers, even a couple of influencers who smelled content buzz, all swarmed into town. They started interviewing locals. People told stories of Karen fining them for having basketball hoops, for planting non-HOA-approved flowers, for letting their kids ride bikes after 6 p.m. She had ruled her neighborhood like a cartoon villain with a clipboard, and now, finally, the script had flipped. Friday morning arrived, and I stood at the courthouse doors in my usual boots and denim. Macy wore a simple white blouse, and Clint brought a lawn chair just to sit outside and wave at reporters. Karen arrived flanked by her lawyer and 2 assistants, face tight, lips pressed into a line that looked carved from stone. She avoided eye contact with everyone and stormed inside like she still believed this was her show. She was wrong. The judge wasted no time. After reviewing the initial documents, he asked one question that hung in the air like a thunderclap. "Ms. Albright, do you have any documented authority over the property in question?" Karen stammered, talked about past influence, implied consent, historical oversight. But the judge didn't want fluff. He wanted facts. Carla stood and calmly handed him every legal record, the exclusion document from 5 years ago, the deed signed by Brad, the property line map verified by the county, and the multiple harassment reports filed since I moved in. The judge took one